This is your beginner's guide to real knife sharpening on a whetstone. Now, if you're a beginner, chances are you've ended up frustrated with duller blades, wasted time, or you just really haven't known where to start with whetstone sharpening. I made my first knife at the age of 14, and now my custom knives sell all across North America, and I still hand sharpen every single one of them on a whetstone before it leaves the shop. Now, by the end of this video, you're gonna have a razor sharp knife, and I'm gonna make this absolutely beginner friendly. So if you've never sharpened a knife before, just follow along step by step, and by the end, you'll have a clean, sharp edge you can be really proud of. So here's how we're gonna break it all down. First, we're gonna talk about choosing which stones to use. Then we're gonna talk about locking in your sharpening angle. After that, we're gonna talk about how to get a great even bevel on both sides of the blade. And finally, I'll show you how to test your edge for sharpness. Let's talk about stones and grits. So the process of sharpening a knife is just the process of removing material until you get a clean edge. To do that, we use stones at different grits. So normally what we do is we'll start off at a low grit around 400 or 320, 400, and then we'll move to higher and higher grits to get our edge finer and finer. So what you see here are fancy Naniwa stones. They're quite expensive. That's what I'm going to be using today, but you don't need to have these. When I first started, I was using this stone. It's two-sided, so it's got a coarse grit on one side and a finer grit on the other, and I think I paid about $20 on Amazon for this. Highly recommend you pick up something like that if you don't want to break the bank. All right, let's talk about what you're going to need before you get started. I typically like to do this near water, so at a sink is best, but today we're not at a sink, so I've got this tub full of water, which works just as well. You're going to need some way to hold your stones. So here I have a sink bridge, which is made for this purpose. However, you can totally do this on your countertop. Just take a towel, wet it, make it damp, and then you can put your stone right on top and it won't slip around. Some stone kits also come with a base that has a rubberized bottom. This works really well as well. A few other things you're gonna need. You're gonna need some paper towel, and you're gonna want a dry, clean sponge. We'll get to that at the end of the video. And you're also gonna want some newsprint or some printer paper, and that's just for testing the sharpness when we're all done. So with all that being said, let's get to the next step. Before we get started, I want to address the biggest issue that beginners have when it comes to sharpening with whetstones, and that is finding and holding the sharpening angle. What I want you to do is grab your knife in your dominant hand. For me, that's my right hand. And I want you to choke up on the knife as far as you can with your middle finger. Then what you're gonna do is roll your hand over and place your pointer finger on the spine. Now, take your knife and put it edge down on your stone so that the edge of the knife is touching the stone, but also your pointer finger is touching the stone. And right here, this angle you've got, this is pretty much the ideal sharpening angle for most kitchen knives. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your knife, you're gonna wanna place the edge on the stone and find your sharpening angle, okay, as I showed you before. Now the idea here is you want to keep your blade as parallel to the stone as possible. So I don't wanna be sharpening like this. I wanna be sharpening like this. And the reason for that is because we want as much contact with the stone as possible. That's gonna give us the most even edge. All right, so I'm finding my sharpening angle. I'm bringing my blade in as parallel as I can. The next thing you want to do is place your non-dominant hand fingers as close to the edge as possible. These are going to be giving you the pressure that you need, and they're also going to be guiding the knife. Now, you don't want them to be touching the stone and the knife because you're going to get them caught under the edge and you will get cut. So you want to move them up slightly to somewhere where it's comfortable. Now the whole idea here is we're going to be doing push-pull motions across the stones to try to remove some of the edge material on one side. Now as we do that, the edge is actually going to roll over and form what's called a burr. And that's perfect. That's what we want. We want to form a burr on this side of the knife, and then we're going to move to the other side. So the way that we do that, find our sharpening angle, find the angle compared to the stone. We place our fingers on the blade as close to the edge as we can comfortably. And then we're going to do a push-pull motion with the pushing motion having a little bit more pressure and then releasing that pressure on the way back. So for example, I'm pushing with some pressure, not too much pressure. And then on the way back, I'm just letting off the pressure and I'm still dragging across the stone. So push, pull like that. And you're going to do that maybe 6 to 10 times in this spot of the knife, which is close to the heel. Now, once you've done that 6 to 10 times, you're gonna simply move your fingers up the blade. So from the heel, you know, maybe an inch up, and you're gonna continue to do that. Same motion. And you're gonna simply walk your fingers up the blade while maintaining your sharpening angle. Now, if you're saying, whoa, whoa, Dorian, this is way too difficult, I'm not able to do this, you can slow it down. Okay, so you can simply do a few push-pull motions. And if you feel like you've lost the edge or it's rocking back and forth, just stop, reset your grip, find that sharpening angle, okay, and then do a few more push-pulls. Okay, once you're comfortable with that, stop, move your fingers up the blade, and continue. And just do this as slowly or as quickly as you'd like until you get to the tip of the knife. Now, the tip of the knife is a little bit different. What you're going to want to do with the tip of the knife is to actually lift the knife, so lift the handle so that the tip touches, and then you're just going to do a small rocking motion. That's it. So at this point, you can check for a burr. Once you've gone from the heel to the tip, it's time to check for the burr. So I want you to take your dominant hand, the one that was just holding the knife handle. I want you to turn it over so that your thumb is under the blade. Okay? Thumb under the blade like so. Then I want you to take your 4 fingers and I want you to just push lightly down the blade. Now, if you don't feel anything catching, you don't have a burr yet. And that's fine. You just have to keep sharpening. But if you do feel a burr, that's your indication that you're going to switch to the other side. So I've only been sharpening for a few minutes here, but I can already feel a nice burr evenly everywhere along the blade. Now, it may be the case that you're going to find that the burr, appears down here, but not in the middle, and then again at the tip. So if you've got an uneven burr, that just means you need to focus on a few areas of your knife. So just go back and sharpen those few areas until you have a nice even burr. So for me, I've got a nice even burr, so I'm going to continue on with the next step. All right, so the next step is simply to flip the knife over and to raise a burr on the other side of the blade. Now, that means using your non-dominant hand, which for some people might be an issue, but what I like to do is simply take exactly what I was doing with my right hand, or my dominant hand, and I'm doing it simply with my left hand, or my non-dominant hand. So I'm taking the knife, and I'm putting it in the other hand. I'm choking up as far as I can with my middle finger, rolling my hand over, and placing my pointer finger along the spine of the knife. And simply doing the exact same motions, but with my left hand. Now, once you've done a full pass on this side of the blade, it's time to check for a burr. Now, the burr is going to be on the opposite side of the blade than it was the first time. So you're going to flip the knife over and you're going to put your thumb on top of the blade and your 4 fingers underneath are going to push along the blade like so. And you're just going to be feeling for that burr. So if your fingers feel nothing, you're not there yet. You don't have the burr. But if they catch, then you can feel it. You can feel that you've got a burr, and once it's nice and even along the entire blade, that's your indication to move to the next step, which is actually doing the exact same process we just did, but with a finer stone. Once you've raised a burr on both sides of the blade, it's time to move to your higher grit. So for me, I'm going to grab this 1000 grit stone and place it on my sink bridge. I grab my knife and now I'm flipping over to the other side. So I'm back to the side that I started on in my right hand. I'm finding my sharpening angles, setting my knife edge across the stone, and I'm simply going to repeat the exact same process that I just did, but at the higher grit. Now once I've done a full pass, once again, I'm going to check for the burr. Now as you move up the grits, you're going to notice the burr gets finer and finer, and sometimes it gets a little tricky to feel. I can feel the burr up here on the blade, but I don't quite have a burr down here, so I'm going to continue for a little bit. Now here's a bit of a trick that I want to teach you. You can see all of this sludge forming on the stone. That's what we call slurry. All it is a mixture of water, a little bit of probably the stone grit, and some of the steel from your knife. Now you may be tempted to wash this away. It's much better to keep the slurry on your stone and just add little bits of water here and there where your stone is starting to dry out. The reason for this is the slurry actually has a little bit of grit in it, and what it does is it allows you to sharpen more evenly across your entire knife. So definitely keep the slurry in there while you're sharpening. Once you've done a full pass, just check for that burr. Now I can feel I've got a nice burr all along this blade. So that's my cue. If I want to move to an even higher grit. Now I've got a 5,000 grit, I've got a 15,000 grit. For most uses in the kitchen, 1,000 to 5,000 is probably the most that you would really want. 15,000 is really like a very nice mirror polish. So I could stop here and be very happy with the result, or I could move to the 5,000. Today I feel like I'm going to move to the 5,000. I'll just do a little bit more so that you guys can see it. So once again, I'm wetting the stone and I'm simply flipping the knife over and continuing on, trying to get that burr on the other side. All right, I'm going to check for the burr, and it's very slight. It's a little harder to feel. I've got it almost everywhere. I need a little work down at the heel and just a little more work at the tip. All right, so now I can feel the burr all along the blade. And this is my highest grit for today, which means I've finished the sharpening process. Now what's left to do is to remove the burr completely and then test the knife for sharpness. There are many ways to remove the burr, and this is a very important part of the process, but today I'm going to show you just one way, which I find is the quickest and easiest way, and that is to use the scratchy side of a sponge. So grab your knife, grab your sponge, and you're going to just lightly brush your knife edge back and forth on the scratchy side of the sponge like so. Now what you're doing when you do this is you're essentially moving that burr, that very small piece of metal along the edge, you're making it move back and forth and weakening it. Now once you've done that a few times, what I want you to do is very lightly run your edge along the sponge, and you might start to see some metal bits and pieces come off the edge, and that's just the burr being removed. So you're going to want to do this a couple times. At different angles, like I'm doing. And now what you want to do is test for the burr on both sides of the blade as we did before. And if you don't feel anything, that's perfect. That means that the burr is gone. So for me, I can't feel anything, which means I've effectively gotten rid of the burr and I'm ready to now test my edge for sharpness. Now the last step in the process is to test for sharpness. Now the very best way to test for sharpness is just to take your knife into the kitchen and start chopping fruits and vegetables and see how it performs. But because we've got all this set up, we want to do a small test before we get there, just in case we need to refine anything on our edge. So what I want you to do is grab a piece of printer paper, grab your knife, and all you're going to do is hold the paper tightly between your thumb and forefinger, and you're going to slice the sheet of paper at a diagonal like this. Now, you should be able to get a nice clean cut along the entire edge, just like what I'm doing here. Okay, if the blade catches at any point, that just means that your edge needs a little bit of work in that area, and you can just drop down to your latest grit and work on that spot, remove the burr, and then test again for sharpness. So that's it for today. I hope you guys found that helpful. Thanks a lot.